an empire spanning 3 continents collapsed in a single afternoon. Its army outnumbered the enemy several times over. Its king had chosen the battlefield himself, months in advance. He had leveled the ground, gathered every soldier he could find. None of it mattered. This is the day Alexander ended the Persian Empire. After his defeat at Issus, Darius had fled but not surrendered. He still ruled the vast majority of his enormous empire. For nearly 2 years, he worked to rebuild his shattered forces. He gathered soldiers from every corner of his territory. Cavalry came from Bactria, Media, and the Iranian plateau. Infantry arrived from Mesopotamia, Syria, and lands even farther east. Recruiters traveled to the empire's most distant provinces, seeking every available soldier. Ancient sources describe the resulting army as staggeringly, almost impossibly large. Some claimed it reached hundreds of thousands, even into the millions. Modern historians consider these numbers heavily exaggerated for effect. Ancient writers often inflated enemy numbers to magnify a victor's achievement. Even conservative estimates, however, place it far larger than Alexander's own force. Darius also learned lessons from his earlier defeat at Issus. There, narrow terrain had neutralized his numerical advantage significantly. This time, he was determined not to repeat that mistake. He selected a wide, open plain near a village called Gaugamela. This site sat close to the city of Arbela, in modern-day Iraq. It offered ample space for his massive cavalry to maneuver freely. He even had the ground deliberately leveled in some areas beforehand. Some accounts describe caltrops and hidden obstacles scattered across other sections. This preparation was meant to clear a path for his scythed chariots. These vehicles carried blades mounted on their wheels, designed to cut down infantry. Darius also brought war elephants, transported from territories near India. For many of Alexander's soldiers, these animals would be a complete surprise. Few Macedonian soldiers had ever seen such creatures in battle before. Alexander, meanwhile, approached the coming battle very differently. His army numbered only around 47,000 soldiers total. This included his disciplined Macedonian phalanx, cavalry, and various support units. Despite being significantly outnumbered, his forces were experienced and highly cohesive. They had already won 2 major battles against Persian armies previously. Every soldier in his ranks had trained under a unified command structure for years. Confidence, discipline, and battlefield experience gave them an edge numbers couldn't fully measure. Still, even Alexander recognized the serious challenge that Gaugamela presented. On the night before battle, Alexander's officers grew increasingly nervous. Some urged a surprise night attack, hoping to offset Persian numbers. Parmenion, his senior general, argued strongly in favor of this approach. Alexander reportedly refused this suggestion outright. He wanted a clear, decisive daylight victory, not a chaotic nighttime raid. He worried that darkness would only favor confusion, benefiting the larger army. According to legend, he slept remarkably well the night before battle. Officers reportedly struggled to wake him at the planned hour. When woken later than expected, he reportedly explained his calm confidence directly. He said the battle was already effectively won through preparation. Whether entirely true or embellished later, the story reflected his approach. He trusted his planning far more than raw panic or last-minute tricks. On October 1st, 331 BC, the 2 armies finally faced each other. Darius arranged his forces across a wide, extended battle line. Cavalry from Bactria and Scythia held his left wing under a commander named Bessus. Median and Mesopotamian cavalry anchored his right side instead. Scythed chariots and elephants were positioned toward the center of his formation. His formation stretched for miles across the open, leveled plain. Alexander organized his own forces with a very different approach entirely. Recognizing his numerical disadvantage, Alexander adopted an unusual defensive structure. His army formed something closer to a flexible, hollow rectangle overall. A secondary line of troops stood ready to face any breakthrough. This design was meant to protect against being surrounded on all sides. Given the sheer size of the Persian force, encirclement was a serious risk. Every unit understood its role in case the formation was tested. As the battle began, Alexander made a deliberate and calculated choice. He advanced his own forces at an angle, moving steadily rightward. This maneuver drew Persian cavalry away from the center of their own line. It also aimed to lead them beyond the specially prepared, leveled ground. Darius, following the movement, ordered his own cavalry to counter it. Bessus and his forces shifted left, attempting to prevent Alexander from escaping the prepared, leveled ground. As Persian units extended further to match Alexander's movement, gaps began forming elsewhere in their formation. Coordinating such an enormous force across a widening line proved increasingly difficult. Darius launched his scythed chariots early in the confrontation. Macedonian soldiers, however, had prepared specifically for this exact threat. As chariots approached, soldiers opened gaps in their ranks deliberately. This allowed the vehicles to pass harmlessly through rather than crash into solid lines. Light infantry and javelin throwers then attacked the drivers directly. Some soldiers reportedly grabbed at the chariot's reins as they passed. Most chariots were neutralized quickly, causing far less damage than intended. The elephants, too, proved less decisive than Darius had likely hoped. Unfamiliar terrain and constant noise seemed to unsettle the animals significantly. As fighting intensified on the flanks, a critical opportunity emerged. With so much Persian cavalry pulled toward the flanks, their center thinned noticeably. Alexander spotted this gap forming directly in front of Darius's own position. This was precisely the opening he had been maneuvering to create. Without hesitation, he gathered his elite companion cavalry personally. He formed them into a tight, wedge-shaped formation for maximum impact. Every rider understood the target the moment the charge began. Alexander led the charge directly toward this weakened section himself. His cavalry smashed through the gap with tremendous, concentrated force. Macedonian infantry advanced simultaneously, widening the breach even further. The attack drove straight toward Darius's own personal position on the field. Ancient accounts describe intense, desperate fighting around the Persian king once again. Elite guards fought and died trying to protect their king's position. Much like at Issus, Darius faced immediate and mortal danger personally. Seeing Alexander's cavalry closing in with terrifying speed, panic apparently set in. Once again, Darius chose to abandon the field rather than risk capture. He turned his chariot, or possibly a horse, and fled the battle entirely. This decision would prove just as consequential as it had before. For the second time in his reign, his own soldiers watched him run. However, the battle was far from finished elsewhere on the field. On the Macedonian left flank, Parmenion faced overwhelming Persian pressure. Persian cavalry had broken through in places, threatening to encircle his forces. Some Persian riders even reached the Macedonian camp positioned behind the lines. Reports reached Alexander that his own camp was under direct attack. This news forced an incredibly difficult decision in the middle of pursuit. Alexander had a clear opportunity to chase down the fleeing Darius immediately. Capturing or killing him then might have ended the war instantly. Instead, he chose to turn back and support his struggling left flank. This decision likely cost him the immediate chance to capture Darius personally. It probably also saved Parmenion's forces from a genuine, serious collapse. Alexander's cavalry crashed into the Persian forces threatening the Macedonian left. Combined with Parmenion's own resistance, this counterattack finally broke Persian resolve entirely. With Darius already fled and his center collapsed, Persian morale crumbled rapidly. What had briefly looked like a contested, difficult battle turned decisive. Persian units across the entire field began breaking and retreating in disorder. Alexander's forces pursued the fleeing army for a considerable distance afterward. Casualty estimates, like troop numbers, vary enormously across ancient sources. Persian losses were almost certainly severe, likely reaching into the tens of thousands. Macedonian losses, by comparison, were reportedly far smaller in scale. The political consequences of this single battle were absolutely enormous. With Darius's army shattered, organized resistance across Persia essentially collapsed. City after city, including the great capitals, began surrendering without further fighting. Babylon opened its gates peacefully, welcoming Alexander as a new ruler. Susa followed shortly after, yielding enormous royal treasuries without resistance. Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of the empire, fell soon afterward as well. Alexander had effectively become master of the entire Persian Empire. For Darius himself, the aftermath proved even more tragic than defeat. Having fled the battlefield, he attempted to regroup his remaining forces. But his authority, already badly damaged, continued eroding rapidly among his own nobles. Bessus, the same commander who had led his cavalry at Gaugamela, eventually turned against him. In 330 BC, Bessus and other conspirators seized and imprisoned Darius directly. As Alexander's forces closed in pursuit, the conspirators made a final brutal choice. Rather than let Darius fall into Alexander's hands alive, they killed him. Alexander reportedly found his body abandoned, still showing signs of the betrayal. Alexander's response to this discovery revealed something about his own self-image. Rather than celebrating his rival's death, he treated it with genuine respect. He ordered Darius given a proper royal burial befitting a legitimate king. He later pursued and punished Bessus for the betrayal and regicide committed. In Alexander's view, killing a king this way was a serious crime. It didn't matter that Darius had been his sworn enemy for years. Historians consistently rank Gaugamela among history's most consequential battles. It wasn't simply another victory in a long, successful campaign. It marked the effective end of the centuries-old Persian Achaemenid Empire, an empire that had once conquered Egypt, Babylon, and stretched toward India. All of it collapsed within a single day's fighting on an open plain. Alexander, barely 25 years old, now controlled territory few rulers ever had. Consider the sheer scale of what actually happened at Gaugamela. A smaller, outnumbered army defeated one of history's largest empires. Careful preparation, disciplined tactics, and calculated risk-taking proved decisive. Darius had chosen the ground, gathered overwhelming numbers, and still lost completely. Alexander's willingness to abandon pursuit and protect his flank proved equally crucial. Gaugamela remains a lesson in how discipline can overcome sheer numerical force. Sometimes the largest army isn't the one that wins the day.